Hello, welcome to the ENCOM Wireless Broadband Mesh Presentation 2 on programming your mesh radios with Stratos. For this presentation, we will be programming a mesh node using the Stratos software and going through all the various programmings for it. It is also recommended, if you have not done so, to please view the first presentation on the mesh system in order to understand network design and considerations before proceeding on with programming your mesh radio. We will now program a ENCOM mesh node here. Once again, I would recommend that if you have not done so, to please view the first presentation on the mesh nodes. Understanding your design and network beforehand will go a long way and will help ease the programming of your mesh radios here. From the radio list, double-click and select the ENCOM mesh node. You will be at the basic settings screen. From this point, you can rename your mesh node, as well as give it an IP address, its network mask, and default gateway. You can then proceed to the Location tab. From the Location tab, select the color icon that you would like to use, followed by the icon style. Hold down the Shift key and then left-click on the mouse in order to place your point on your map. You can now proceed to the Radio 1 tab. The radio that we're connected to is a mesh node with two radio cards. As you can see from the top, we have Radio 1 and Radio 2. This particular variation is going to be a 5858 mesh node. You can also get other variations such as a 2458, 4958, 4924, and so forth. This will all be dependent upon what is required in your network design. When programming a mesh node, it's very straightforward and simple here. You start off with your radio network setup. For your network type, you have three options: mesh only, mesh and clients only. By selecting mesh only, you are telling this radio is going to be only a mesh node which can be linked to other mesh nodes. With the mesh and clients option, this mesh radio can then link to a client type of radio. For example, if you're out in the field and you have a laptop, this laptop will be able to connect to this particular mesh node as a client, as well as the radio itself will still be linked to other mesh nodes in the system. If you select client only, you are going to be telling this mesh node it will only be able to link to a client type of radio. For example, a laptop or any other type of device like that. For this example, we will say that it is only going to be a mesh only. The next step would be to assign a unique SSID for this radio card. The channel mode is going to be either a 20 or 40 megahertz channel that is available on these mesh radios. For applications that require a bit more bandwidth, it is recommended to use a 40 megahertz channel as opposed to a 20 megahertz channel. Again, this will be very dependent upon your line of sight as well as your design considerations. Now for each of these mesh nodes, it'll always be as a master. You will never be able to change this option and make it into a remote. Once we have completed the changes that we'd want to apply to the radio network setup, we can now go to the radio parameter setup. The frequency band and the wireless link rate will always be locked. You will not be able to change the frequency in which these radios operate at. The next step is to go down to your channel and assign a fixed frequency for this particular radio card to use. It is always recommended to run a spectrum scan for this particular area before you are assigning a fixed frequency. By default, in most applications, the output power can be left at maximum. It is also important to note that if you do have any questions during your installation and programming of your ENCOM mesh node, you can always hit the F1 key to bring up the integrated help file, which will tell you what exactly viewing and the descriptions for it. We can now proceed to the Radio 2 tab. The Radio 2 tab is going to be identical to the Radio 1 tab. Here we will set our network type to also be a mesh only. We will have a unique SSID for this radio card. In most applications, it is recommended to have a unique SSID for Radio 1 and Radio 2. We do this in order to minimize any sort of interference that we may have with ourselves in the network. Once again, the radio mode is left as a master and cannot be changed. We can set this one to a 20 MHz channel just because for this particular radio use, we may not need that high a bandwidth availability. We will now proceed down to the radio parameter setup. As you can see, our frequency band and link rate is going to be locked. When you're selecting your channel frequency for a mesh node that has two radio cards, it is always recommended to pick a frequency that is at least 20 or 40 megahertz away from what the Radio 1 card frequency is. So let's just go back to the Radio 1 tab here. For example, we picked a frequency of 5255. So for our Radio 2 card, we'd want to stay away from 5255 and either be 20 or 40 megahertz away from there. It's always best to go at the other end of the spectrum so you're not interfering with the other radio card. For this example, we will select 5800. This completes the programming on this mesh node if it is just going to be a standard mesh node in your system. However, if you do want to make this radio a gateway node, proceed on to the Network tab. Under the Network tab, you will see a sub-tab called ENCOM Mesh Protocol. Click on this tab. Here you have the option to select whether it's going to be a gateway radio or a standard mesh radio. Now remember from the first presentation, a gateway radio is going to be an access point out of the mesh network. You would select gateway radio if you wanted to use this option. Otherwise, you can just leave it as a standard mesh radio. Once again, for any of these screens, you can hit the F1 key to bring up the integrated help file, which will tell you what you are viewing on that particular screen. In order to complete your programming of your ENCOM mesh node, hit the Save button to download this configuration to the radio unit. Go back to the radio list and you will now see the name has changed to the user-defined name. You can view the item properties of this particular radio on the right-hand side. As you can see from Radio 1, it has the SSID of North. It is a master radio. It is operating on a 40 megahertz channel. The channel of 5255 for the frequency. You look at the radio, it has accepted our South SSID. It is also a master with a 20 megahertz channel and a frequency of 5800. This completes the programming of the ENCOM mesh node. If you'd like to learn more or have any questions, please visit us at www.encomwireless.com. Thank you.